Hi folks, we're at LR Workshop. Rear upper shock bushes on a Defender are an absolute pain. They are a pig to do. And I had to replace mine because there was a bit of wear in them on one side and then they had rusted to the shock bracket. There's a bit of a lack of success with these shock bushes on the internet and there's not a whole lot of content around. So I thought, you know what? I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it from a DIY perspective and I'm going to do it right. I'm going to show it and make a video out of it and present it here to the world. Well, a few things went wrong. If you can accept, then you're not going to see in this video me actually fitting the bushes right in the final moments into the shocks. Then I hope there's still a bit of value in this video for you as I go through the process, experimenting a bit and trying to replace these buggers. I thought the simplest way to get the shock bush off would be to remove the turret, replace it with a second-hand one I've got because it was a bit crusty. Otherwise, I wouldn't really be able to get this. You'd need a puller, I think, to be able to get the shock off. So to do that from the other side, from the inboard side, I angle grinded through the bolts because they're pretty corroded on the ends. It would be easier to cut these off and then wind the bolt out over a shorter distance. Here you'll see the positions I put my angle grinder in. I think after this is when I bought my reciprocating saw, which would have made this job a lot easier. But I just had to be a bit careful here to make sure the angle grinder was positioned correctly, and then I had to use a bungee cord to keep the flexible brake hose out of the way. The chassis underneath looked a bit crusty, but it was pretty solid. The shock tower itself was pretty crusty and horrible, but actually the bolts that were inside the chassis look as good as the day they were fitted in the factory. Now, considering the bracket was still attached to the shock absorber, this made actually quite a good leverage handle. So I set about drilling out the bush. The burning method's not really for me. I used progressively larger drill bits as we went, and then I guess this is inevitable. You will break a drill bit at some point. From there I moved on to the washing up liquid and giving it a good jiggle. It surprisingly easily came out of the shock. Now, this is the problem getting the bushes back in. I'm sure you're aware. It's an hourglass shape. It doesn't go in very particularly easily. Now, the cheating method is to cut this bush in half and fit it from either side. I've seen that done on Defenders in various parts of the world. But ideally, it should remain intact and be pushed in one piece. I had done this previously all the way back in Belize with a threaded rod, some nuts and a lot of spacer washers. So I thought, okay, I'm going to try and use that method again. So I bought an 18mm bolt and 18mm nuts and washers, and I used one of the washers, the shock bush washers that have got a conical side, and I set about trying to compress the bush into the shock. But alas, it would bind up near the end. So then I tried to transfer what I'd done into the vise and it would just spring out. From then on, I kept having to go at the vise, and it keeps popping out. It's quite tricky, but I did get it in eventually, and this is the bit where when I actually did it, it took me quite a few attempts. I hadn't turned the camera on for the final attempt, unfortunately, which is why I don't have the footage there. But no matter, I thought I'll get it on the second attempt with the second shock, and then when I was finally pressing it in with the vise, which did work this time, I didn't bother with the bolt and nut method. The camera ran out of storage and the video file got corrupted, so I cannot show you how this actually works. Suffice to say, it went back together with genuine bolts and nuts and new washers and a second-hand shock bracket. A liberal coating of copper grease will hopefully keep the rust at bay for a couple more years at least. The 3 bolts are done up to 44 Newton meters and the final bolt on the shock itself is done up to 75 Newton meters. So I achieved it in the end, but it was a bit of a fail overall, and it wasn't a particularly pleasant experience and hasn't been in the past when I've done this as well. But if you've got some great tips on how to do this from a DIY perspective, leave a comment below. You're probably going to say, get a hydraulic press or something like that. Anyway, thanks for watching. Bye for now.